I don't like the world sometimes, and sometimes the world don't like me. I guess it's only fair, but it's neither here nor there. When you're all alone, all alone, all alone, all alone. I got no time for self-pity. I'm not about to cry, though no one seems to care. It's neither here nor there. When you're all alone, all alone, all alone, all alone.
But then, without a warning, a whooshing, roaring sound shook the trees and houses, shook the sky and ground, and Emerson, astonished, saw an eerie sight: a rocket ship-shaped kennel heading for the light. Smoke poured from the engine, sparks and fire blew. Straight for Lighthouse Island the spaceship kennel flew. It hovered for a moment, then fell towards the shore. Emerson said, "Crikey!" and dropped his apple core. Mrs. Lighthouse Keeper, lantern in her hand, crept towards the kennel lying on the sand. Mr. Lighthouse Keeper wasn't quite so bold. "Let's go back," he whispered. "Our cocoa's getting cold. And it's 7:30, it's nearly time for bed." Mrs. Lighthouse Keeper sighed and shook her head. She knelt beside the kennel. She opened up the door. And then, to their amazement, the lighthouse keepers saw a body white and spotty, a nose as black as night, a tail, all short and stumpy, wagging with delight. Mrs. Lighthouse Keeper picked it up and said, "Oh, darling, it's a baby," and kissed its furry head. Mr. Lighthouse Keeper stared at her agog. "A baby?" said her husband. "You're crazy. It's a dog." Mrs. Lighthouse Keeper turned an angry red. "Baby," she said grimly. "Dog," her husband said. But then the creature whimpered and made them jump in fright. "Sorry," said the creature, "but both of you are right. Half of me's a puppy, the other half's a boy." Mrs. Lighthouse Keeper clapped her hands with joy. "Spot's the name for you, son," the proud new mother said. "First we'll have some supper, and then it's time for bed." Through the days that followed, Spot was everywhere, racing round the island, jumping in the air, barking after seagulls, always out of reach, splashing in the ocean, digging up the beach. But when it was bedtime, the lighthouse keepers found Spot lay on their blankets and wriggled round and round. He'd whimper and he'd snuffle, he'd toss and turn and kick, and if they started sleeping, he'd wake them with a lick. Until one weary morning, Spot's new father said, "How am I supposed to sleep when Spot is in our bed? We need another bedroom where Spot can sleep alone. But where are we to find one?" He gave a hollow moan. But then they heard a scratching from somewhere overhead, and then excited barking drew them from their bed. Both the lighthouse keepers went upstairs and saw Spot with tail a-wagging beside a secret door. Mrs. Lighthouse Keeper looked inside and said, "A room for Spot to sleep in. Go and get a bed." "It's dark and dim and gloomy," her worried husband cried. "Even our own lighthouse cannot shine inside." "It only needs a nightlight, some ornaments, a rug," said Mrs. Lighthouse Keeper. "We'll make it warm and snug." So Spot slept in his bedroom, safe and tucked up tight, and both the lighthouse keepers spent a restful night. Summer turned to winter. The days grew dark and cold. Hand in hand together, the lighthouse keepers strolled. The winter sun shone weakly. Seagulls hovered near. Mrs. Lighthouse Keeper stopped and shed a tear. "What is it?" said her husband. "You're crying, wife, but why?" Mrs. Lighthouse Keeper sadly dried her eye. "I know I'm being silly," she told him with a smile, "but Spot has gone and grown up in such a little while." Mr. Lighthouse Keeper took her by the hand. "It's hard," he told her gently, "but try to understand. It happened all too quickly. We still can't work out how, but Spot is Spot no longer. Spot is Dogman now." And then there came a barking, a racing from their home. Heading straight towards them came Dogman, fully grown.